morning. Page 33. Just going to finish up this chapter here. It was not that someone took fright as Katorga killed off one alphabet after another, but simply that, with the war drawing to an end, there was no need for such a savage deterrent. No new police units could be formed. Working hands were needed, and in Katorga people were dying off uselessly. So as early as 1945, huts in Katorga ceased to be prison cells. Doors were opened to let in the daylight. Slop buckets were carried out to the latrines. Prisoners were allowed to make their own way to the medical section and were trotted to the mess hall at the double to keep their spirits up. The thieves who used to filch other prisoners' rations were removed, and mess orderlies appointed from among the politicals themselves. Later on, prisoners were allowed to receive letters 2 a year. The line between Katorga and the ordinary camps became blurred in the years 1946-47. Unfastidious managing engineers did not let political distinctions stand in the way of plan fulfillment. And began, in Vorkuta at least, to transfer political offenders with good qualifications to ordinary camp divisions, where nothing but the numbers on their backs reminded them of Katorga. While rank-and-file manual laborers from corrective-labor camps were shoved into Katorga to fill gaps. In this way, the thoughtless managers might have thwarted Stalin's great idea of resurrecting Katorga. Except that in 1948 a new idea came to him just in time, that of dividing the natives of Gulag into distinct groups, separating the socially acceptable thieves and delinquents from the socially irredeemable 58s, political prisoners. All this was part of a still greater concept, the reinforcement of the home front. It is obvious from the choice of words that Stalin was preparing for a war in the near future. Special camps were set up with a special regime, slightly milder than that of Katorga earlier on, but harsher than that of ordinary camps. To distinguish them from other camps, fantastic poetical titles were invented for them instead of ordinary geographical names, such new creations included Gorlag at Norilsk, Berlag on Kolyma, Minlag on the Inta, Rashlag on the Peshora, Dubrovlag, Epitoma, Potma, Ozerlag at Taishet, Steplag, Penchlag, and Luglag in Kazakhstan, Kanishlag in Kamarova province. Remember lag, in Gulag, the lag is lagery, meaning camp, so all of these end in lag, meaning camp. Dark rumors crept around the corrective labor camps that 58s would be sent to special extermination camps. It did not, of course, enter the heads either of those carrying out the orders or of the victims that any formal additional sentences might be necessary. Oh, wow! The registration and distribution and the security operations sections were worked furiously. Secret lists were made and driven away somewhere for approval. Long red prisoner transport trains were moved in. Companies of brisk red-tabbed guards marched up with Tommy guns, dogs, and hammers, and the enemies of the people, as their names were called, meekly obeyed the inexorable summons to leave their cozy huts and begin the long transit. But not all 58s were summoned. It was only later, comparing notes with their acquaintances, that the prisoners realized which of them had been left behind on corrective labor islands with minor offenders, Among them were those convicted under Article 5810 with no further charges. This covered simple anti-Soviet agitation, which meant that it was a gratuitous act without accomplices and not aimed at anyone in particular, though it may seem almost impossible to imagine such agitators. Millions of them were on the books and were left behind on the older islands of Gulag. Agitators who had formed duets or trios, shown any inclination to listen to each other, to exchange views, or to grumble in chorus, had been burdened with an additional charge under Article 58, Section 11 on hostile groups, as 11 of anti-Soviet organizations now went off to special camps. So needless to say, the traitors to the motherland, 58-1A and 1B, bourgeois nationalists and separatists, 58-2, agents of the international bourgeoisie, 58-4, spies, 58-6, subversives, 58-7, terrorists, 58-8, wreckers, 58-9, and economic saboteurs, 58-14. This was the most convenient place to put those prisoners of war, Germans in mid-leg, or Japanese in Nordserleg, whom it was intended to detain beyond 1948. On the other hand, non-informers, 58-12, and abettors of the enemy, 58-3, in collective labor camps remained there where they were, whereas prisoners in Katorga sentenced specifically for aiding and abetting the enemy now went on to the special camps with all the rest. The wisdom of the separators was even harder to fathom than appears in this description. Criteria still unexplained left in the corrective labor category female traitors serving 25 years, Unschlag, and here and there the whole camp divisions, including nothing but 58s, Flatsovites, ex-polites around among them. These were not special camps. The prisoners wore no numbers, but the regime was severe. Krasnaya Glinka on the Samara bend of the Volga, the Tuim camp in the Shirin district of Khakassia, and the southern Sakhalin camp were examples. These camps were so harsh that prisoners would have been no worse off in special camps, so that the archipelago, once the Great Partition had been carried out, should never again lapse into confusion. It was provided from 1949 onward that every new naturalized immigrant from the world outside should have written his prison book, apart from his sentence, a ruling of the state security authorities of the prosecutor's office in the oblast as to the type of cage in which this particular bird should always be kept. Oblast is like a province or a sector. Thus, like the seed that dies to produce a plant, Stalin's Katorga grew into the special camp. The red prisoner transport trains traveled the length and breadth of the motherland and the archipelago carrying the new intake. At Inta, they had this sense simply to drive the herd out of one gate and in through another. Chekhov complained that we had no legal definition of Katorga or of its purpose, but that was in the enlightened 19th century. In the middle of the 20th, the caveman century, we didn't even feel the need to understand and define. Old man Stalin had decided that it would be so, and that was all the definition necessary. We just nodded our heads in understanding. That's all. Thank you. Have a good day.